Hello there and welcome. My name's Gina Gardner. I'm an international best-selling author. I'm the host of the W4CY TV and radio show, and I have well over 30 years experience in helping people develop personal empowerment and enlightened leadership. Now, you've embarked upon this program of self-study around becoming a profitable, limitless leader. People who are in business want to succeed. They want their business to be profitable, but they often see this only in monetary terms. And doing so may give you short-term gain, but in the long term, becoming a profitable, limitless leader requires something very different. Now, this is a program of self-study. We offer all sorts of other types of learning for you, books, self-study, engaging within a group, or one-on-one work. But the important thing to recognize before you start is just having the program, just listening to the program may be helpful, because knowledge is power, as they say, but it's applied knowledge that makes the difference. So if you choose to do nothing different as a result, nothing is going to change. But if you make the determined choice that you're going to use some of the insights, the principles and strategies that I'm going to share with you, then you will move forward. We're living at a time where it has become even more vital that we have leaders who are enlightened, who lead with integrity, compassion, and the courage to do what's right. The thinking that got us to this place isn't going to be the thinking that gets us out of this place. And you, as a leader, have the opportunity to make a huge difference, not only to your own life, but to the lives of others. Being a limitless leader means opening the door of possibility and being aware that those opportunities are there when you are ready and when you are aware, and you give that door a nudge open. Now, I'm going to move on to a PowerPoint presentation and recognize that you are going to be working at this at your own pace. Now, there's some of you that will just listen to the whole lot, but I would suggest to you that do it in conjunction with this workbook, this journal, because it again revisits the principles, but sets out questions for you to work through at your own pace, at a quiet time. And if you do that on a regular basis, then you'll find that you really do move you move yourself forward, that you develop and grow. Your evolution becomes accelerated. It's one of a series. There are 4 in the series at the moment, in profitable leadership, limitless leadership, authentic leadership, and emerging leadership. But you've chosen limitless leadership, and that tells me a lot about you, because you have a recognition that you have so much more potential, so much more to give. So let me share the screen and let's get cracking. Okay, so limitless leadership. Ultimately, it's really important to recognize the part you play in terms of your own success, and in doing so, the success of others. One of the things that I'm very engaged with in my whole purposes is about creating leaders who are ready to be the leader of leaders, those who are going to lead by example, those who are going to be in the vanguard and actually moving things forward at an accelerated pace. So hold on to your hats, be prepared that watch it through or break it down into small amounts and then go and do the thinking and the work behind it, whatever suits you, but recognize that this is the catalyst. In and of itself, it's not going to make the difference. So I believe it is time for us to create a completely new definition of what we mean by enlightened, limitless leadership. It may be something, a concept which is new to you, that you know, what is an enlightened leader? You know, how can you be limitless when there's all of the constraints that life offers, you know, and all of those things that underpin those constraints, most particularly your beliefs. And what do we mean by leadership? You know, I talk about in my show, W4CY, I talk about leadership for life. because it is my belief that we are all, if we choose to be, the leaders of our own life, or we can give that responsibility to somebody else, entirely up to us. But I believe timing is everything. We are at a critical time in the evolution of mankind. You know, when you listen to the news and what's going on, you know, the future of our race and of our planet is going to be determined by the quality of leadership. And moment by moment, the choices that we make a real difference. And you can be on the sidelines and think, well, there's only me, what can I do? Or you can actually take up the baton, if you like. You know, if you think about a relay race, take up the baton and make a difference that's going to mean that humanity moves on in a different way, in a more empowering way, without the division, without the hate, without the disruption and challenge where some people haven't got clean water and enough food, and that we are destroying the planet because of greed. Or you can choose to help make a difference. It's ultimately, how do we survive as an individual? I was talking to a client earlier today. In the UK, the most common prescription that is written is for antidepressants. You know, stress, anxiety, depression worldwide have exploded in terms of the numbers. And I think, you know, becoming a limitless leader of your own life, taking control of your own life, but at the same time recognizing that doesn't mean that you try to control everything. The only thing you have power over is you. And if you hand that power over to somebody else, then you're giving them your power. So, you know, people who hand their power to other people, it was, well, you know, what sort of mood are they in? Because if they're happy, then I'm happy. If they're in a grumpy mood, well, that impacts on me. You're giving your power over. And so many people, moment by moment, quite unconsciously choose to give their power. So are you a limitless leader? Are you someone who takes charge of your life moment by moment? Or are you limiting your capacity as the leader of your own life because you let everybody else's judgments count more than yours, everybody else taking on their mood, allowing them to suck the energy out of you? Or there's loads of different ways of doing it. Or are you in control of your own life? And I want you to think about that. You have a family. How do you operate within the family? Now, that could be as a daughter or a son, as a husband, a wife, a partner, as a father or mother, even as an aunt. You're recognizing that how you show up moment by moment in every situation makes a real difference. And families are often the place where life gets really tricky because there's so much baggage. But how you show up in that will determine how other people will respond to. Can't control them, but you can control you. And all of these principles that we're going to be discovering, they are principles for life, but then they also translate into incredibly powerful principles for your working life and for your business. Because ultimately, if you have a business or you're thinking of starting a business, you want your business to be profitable. You want your business to succeed in the long term. And it all starts with you. And the principles in terms of your relationships with yourself and others, all of those translate in terms of how you turn up on a day-by-day basis within your business. So think about your business. What is it important? You know, what's your business about? Is it your passion? Do you have a really strong sense of purpose? You know, and how do you operate day by day within that business? Because if you delay stepping into your own power, and this is not about being authoritarian, it's not about, you know, you'll do what I say, and if I say jump, how high? This is about how you operate. I believe that there's a window of opportunity, and those businesses that are led by limitless leaders will become very successful and very profitable. And those that don't may succeed in the short term, but won't succeed in the long term. You know, there's a paradox. The world is going through a recession because of the pandemic, and yet historically, more millionaires are created during times of challenge and of the economy being in a contracting state than when it's in boom. What makes the difference is the sort of leader you are and how you move yourself and your business forward. But there are also implications in terms of society, you know, how you operate as an individual, the choices you make, simple things like, do you recycle? Do you put your litter in the bin? Do you break the speed limit? You know, all of those things have an impact on you and also on other people. But as a business, the decisions that you make are also going to be far-reaching. You know, how do you show up? What are your core values as a business? You know, how well do you look after your customers? You know, can they trust that if you say you'll do something, that you'll do it, or there'll be a very good reason why not, and you'll communicate that? In those moment-by-moment choices that are made, you determine whether you are limitless or whether you are limited by the thinking and the way in which you operate. And of course, with global warming, with the deforestation, with the problem with litter being found in great islands within the oceans, all of those things are going to determine whether we actually have a planet that will sustain life, maybe not during our lifetime, but for generations to come. And so we are at an incredibly critical time. And I want you to think about, how do you show up day by day? What could you do to be even better? And I don't want to preach. This is not about me saying you should do this, you shouldn't do that. It's about you learning for yourself what is right for you, but doing that in the context of it doing no harm to others and ideally doing great good for others. So what is enlightenment? I believe it's a way of being rather than a specific state. You know, when I've been looking on Canva, for example, for pictures to use, and you put in the word enlightenment, you'll often see a hermit sitting on top of the mountain with crossed legs, contemplating his navel. That for me is not enlightenment. It may be an aspect for some people of enlightenment, but enlightenment for me is about how you show up, how you are. I find it very interesting that we're called human beings when actually, for the most part, we should be called human doings, because in reality, most of us focus on the doing rather than the being. And I know it's been one of my life lessons is to actually get out of my own way, to be quiet and to actually listen to my inner voice, to find my inner wisdom rather than listen to all of the white noise that there is around. But it's more than that. It's about being engaged in a journey of constantly expanding your awareness, your comprehension, your understanding, your consciousness. We are all connected. That maybe sound a little bit strange to those of you that are unfamiliar with this as a principle, but everything you say or do or not leaves a living legacy. And that can be a positive one, a neutral one, or a negative one. You know, the language we use to people, you may not intend it to hurt or to bolster somebody's confidence, but how they receive it will make the difference. So this is about you being constantly in the evolution of expanding. And the very fact that you are here means that you are ready to take that big step on your journey to expansion, to becoming a limitless leader. It requires rigorous self-review, but I need to make it very, very clear. Self-review does not mean getting caught up in judgment. I should have, I shouldn't have, I wish I had, I wish I hadn't. I'm not good enough. Self-review means recognizing those things that we do well, celebrating them and doing them even better, and looking at our areas for development and recognizing that's the journey, that's the lifelong learning that we are on. But it doesn't have to take loads and loads of time, but it is important that you are brutally honest with yourself, all right? You can BS other people, but don't BS yourself. And probably not a good idea to BS other people either. But in that self-review, being really honest with yourself. But the real impact of the being honest is not to beat yourself up. It is about to be able to recognize those things that need your attention and need working on, and to work on them. And that's the purpose of this program. It's the purpose of all of the books I've read, the courses I run, the one-on-one work that I do. It's about helping you recognize that all of those things that perhaps you don't like about yourself, or that you recognize are an area for development, that you have a choice. You can continue to do the same thing, in which case you'll get the same result, or you can choose to step on that journey and to move forward. Entirely up to you. Now, there's a paradox here, and it's one I think that many people struggle with, because the balance between taking action and surrendering the need to control the outcome is one that many people find difficult. And one of the things I think as you become an enlightened limitless leader is to recognize that the action by itself will get you so far. But being in alignment with your purpose, with your inner self, and with the broader consciousness gives you the capacity to accelerate and to expand your achievements. And that's not about being busy. It's not about the activity in isolation. You need both, and there needs to be a balance. One of the things that we do as human beings is that we tend to create a blueprint of how things should be. But the blueprint in our head isn't necessarily the same blueprint that our parents had, for example, in terms of bringing us up, or our staff have. It is about creating a shared blueprint, and that requires you to talk, and it requires you to be open to there being another way of doing things. You know, being right, I believe, is highly overrated. You know, being right might win you the battle, but it won't win you the war. And it's far better to find a third way which works for you and the other person, rather than sticking to your guns and saying, I am right and you are wrong. Of course, there are times when I want somebody to be right. If you're a brain surgeon, I really want you to be right if you're operating on my brain. If you're a pilot, I don't want there to be room for error. But I'm talking about in those daily conversations when people get stuck in the rigidity of, I have to be seen to be right, because that's the only way I feel good about myself. And the being open to other people's perceptions, ideas, and so on, gives you the opportunity to examine your own and together to find the best way forward. Having a strong sense of purpose, and particularly where that purpose is based on service to others, is so important. If you're a business owner, knowing your purpose and knowing your why, that acts as the rocket fuel. You know, on those days when everything feels difficult, you feel as if you're walking through treacle, having that strong sense of purpose can keep you going. But it's no good if it's just in your head. One of the reasons why a strong sense of purpose is so important, that within your business, when you then communicate that to other people and they take ownership of that vision, that purpose, then they too are going to use all of their energy, skills, expertise, creativity, and so on to help you. I work with many businesses, many organizations. And once the purpose is clear and everybody is engaged in that, it's really interesting how that business seems to just take off in a way that it may not have done for years before. Do you know your purpose? Do you know your business's purpose? Now, you may be saying to me, well, I'm a bank, I'm a financial advisor. I advise people. That's not the purpose. What does that advice do for people? What are you providing for those people? I was talking to someone not long ago, and what came out of the discussion, the more I pressed them to say, yeah, but what does that do? What's the impact? Why do you do that? And they were a bank, and they were talking, the work they did was about creating small loans for entrepreneurs and businesses. And ultimately what their purpose was to provide a sound financial framework for those businesses and business owners and staff to thrive, to give them freedom, to give them the opportunity to succeed. And when it moved from the language of, well, we give people loans, to what we do is we help people succeed, to find freedom, to find joy in what they do, to be able to fulfill their purpose. There was a renewed motivation, well, not even renewed, there was a new motivation that had never actually existed before. And everybody then was engaged in, well, how do we make this work better? How do we facilitate not just the money, but the mindset that goes with that, so we can help those businesses? And things moved off in a very, very different way. What's your purpose? Do your staff know what that is? Do your customers and your clientele know that? Because if you've not communicated it to them, then it has far less impact. How can it? Because it's being hidden. And if you want to be limitless, this is about being upfront, about opening your store, about recognizing what's important and why, and sharing that. One of the big principles, the underpinning principle of limitless leadership, is to take radical responsibility for everything that you think, you feel, you say, and you do, and those things which you don't. When you do it, how you do it, how often you do it, all of those things are down to you. Blaming other people, you're not taking radical responsibility. Being judgmental is not the same as taking responsibility. So what's your reality? Do you take responsibility? Because if you don't, then your progression, your development will be limited. The moment you make that decision that you are going to take radical responsibility for what goes on, you are opening a door that hitherto has been closed. And I want to share an example with you. I was working with a dental laboratory. They make vast amounts of crowns and implants, and they have very, very high standards. They work very, very well. But the owner, who also was one of the technicians, was, when I first started working with him, complained about how his staff were always asking, always interrupting what he was doing, saying, is this good enough? What do I do next? And that often his staff didn't do what it was that he wanted. And when I said to him, so whose responsibility is that? He sort of sat back in the chair and thought, well, if I could get better staff, then it'd all be all right. And I suggested to him, it wasn't about getting better staff. It was about how he operated. Why did everybody come and keep asking the questions time after time after time? Partly because he was training them that that's what he wanted to, not explicitly, but implicitly, in that he was the fount of all judgment about quality, and that he had a habit of not saying anything, and then blowing up and losing his temper. So people were fearful that if they didn't check every stage with him, that they would not, they'd not please him, and then he'd get into a mood. Now, I'm perhaps slightly exaggerating that, but to make the point. Once he took radical responsibility, he recognized that the only way forward was to engage them in understanding what did excellence look like in the context of the lab. You know, an excellent this type of crown, an excellent process. What was the difference between mediocre, good, and excellent? And having that ongoing, it's not a once discussion, it's an ongoing discussion about excellence. And now we've developed this far, how can we make it even better? Look at the word presupposition, even better. It presupposes it's not bad, it is better than it was, and it can be even better. As he took responsibility for that, and particularly for his mood, emotional intelligence, incredibly important. And I don't want to spend lots of time here. There is a seminar on the website about emotional intelligence, but it means managing your emotions, being aware of the impact that you have on other people. And I would say to you, it's so important that you manage yourself first. There is no room for ego. Your ego should be at home in bed under your pillow with your pajamas or your nightie. All right, because when you let go of all of that judgment, that ego, that me first, that, you know, I've got to be the one that has all the ideas, then you open up the possibility of using the experience, expertise, and creativity of other people. And collectively, you are so much stronger than if you are working in isolation. And that recognition that as a leader and as a manager, your job is to bring the very best out of others that you work with and bring them together as self-organizing, self-perpetuating teams that can really operate in a cohesive way together. That's a big part of your role. When you do that, you're free to be strategic within your business. You're free to actually move the agenda forward more quickly and to expand not only your own development, but the development of the people that you work with. But you have to be a great role model. You have to model taking radical responsibility. And if you do that, then you will find that other people will follow. So I've already said, for your thoughts. So you might say to me, well, how can I take radical responsibility for my thoughts? Well, we have millions of thoughts a day. And quite a lot of those thoughts we hear as a voice in our head. And if that voice in your head is nagging you and saying, you should have done this, you shouldn't have done that, is it helpful? Then asking, well, okay, how can I couch that in a way that's more helpful in terms of, well, what's my priority? How can I move things forward? Where's the solution? I was talking to a client just this morning about being in solution mode. Have you trained your staff to be problem dumpers? Are you someone who dumps problems on yourself through your thoughts? Be mindful, be aware, start to notice. What are the most common emotions that you feel? You know, think about it over the last week. What is the emotion that you have felt? And that same client this morning was talking about frustration being her biggest emotion. Frustration that things weren't going as she thought they should. They weren't as fast as they should. They weren't as significant as they should be. All of those emotions that are what we would call negative. And I don't think there's anything such thing really as a negative emotion. An emotion is there to give you a message. You know, what do I need to be putting my attention on? What's the lesson? And frustration puts you in a place, frustration, hate, anger, fear, all put you into an unresourced state. When you're unresourced, you are thinking left brain. Left brain tends to be either or. It's very much in the problem. When you are emotionally in the more positive emotions, if you like, of optimism, of hope, of joy, of happiness, of gratitude, forgiveness, love, you are then operating out of your right brain. And those thoughts then help you. They are creating a sense of resourcefulness, that you are in solution finding mode, you are being more creative. And it's really important that you recognize when you're slipping back into old patterns of unhelpful thoughts or emotions, and recognize and move yourself forward. Do you take radical responsibility for your actions, or do you blame other people? You know, oh, well, I couldn't do that because, or, you know, it was really difficult, so I didn't. Do you get caught up in delaying things because they're not perfect, or do you put yourself down? Do you limit yourself because you are stuck in your comfort zone or your familiar zone? Your actions are important, and all of these things we tend to do habitually. You know, our language, we tend to have habitual patterns of words, actions, emotions, and thoughts. And it's really important that we notice those patterns. You know, I often talk about becoming the journalist in your own life, recognizing those patterns, being, you know, studying them in the same way that if you were a journalist and you were given a celebrity to follow, you would study them, their patterns, where they go, who they speak to, what they wear, what they eat, and so on. So to fulfill your potential, okay, doesn't matter what you've done to date. You may feel that you haven't been successful. Well, you've got the opportunity to be successful. You may have been incredibly successful, and yet, like an iceberg, there is so much more if you choose to recognize your full potential. But it requires you to do the deep dive work on yourself. Being a limitless leader is about becoming an expert on yourself. No judgment, but recognizing when you are doing well and being able to tell yourself, well done, and recognizing when you're falling short, when you're dropping below the line, when you are not operating at your full potential, and noticing quickly and doing what it takes to get past that. But the deep dive work on yourself is so important. You are the common denominator in your life. You take yourself into every moment of every day. The relationship that you have with yourself is reflected in the relationship you have with others. So it's important to be your own best friend, to treat yourself well. So all of these things and so much more are dependent upon you doing the deep dive work on you. Isn't it interesting that we often say stuck in our comfort zone, and often it's incredibly uncomfortable? I was talking to somebody yesterday and they talk about it being the familiar zone. And in many ways, I think that's possibly more helpful. But we stay stuck in our comfort zone because better where we are because it feels familiar, rather than taking that leap of faith and stepping outside our comfort zone. I have to smile to myself as I'm making this, because 3 years ago, I'd never done a video. I didn't use Zoom. I had very little internet presence. And now, you know, this is the third video I've made today, because I've made a couple of videos for a group of people. It's become second nature. Is it perfect? No, it's not. Could it improve? Yes, and I'm working on that. But ultimately, stepping outside your comfort zone is a way of helping you move forward. And I think what's helped me is recognizing that rather than it being something that generates fear, I recognize that it's unfamiliar. And when you are in unfamiliar territory, you're not quite sure where things are, but the more you visit it, the more it becomes familiar. And that's very true for anything where you're stepping outside your comfort zone. So be prepared, challenge yourself. And I would say challenge yourself regularly. For me, the big challenge is always around technology. For you, it may be going out and speaking in public. Doesn't matter what it is, but recognize where you are limiting yourself and make an active decision, a choice to do things differently. Recognize everything we do is a choice, everything, even not choosing is a choice. and every choice has consequences. And I'll keep coming back to this because it's just so important. It's interesting, isn't it, that so often we close ourselves down to the possibilities that are hidden in plain sight. They did an experiment with people around how lucky they felt they were. And people put themselves along a continuum from very unlucky to very lucky. Interestingly, when they did an experiment where they had a house with quite a long pathway to the car park, and they hid different denominations of money in different places, but they were exactly the same for every participant. And one by one, the participants were invited to go to a meeting in the house. What I found fascinating is that those who considered themselves unlucky or very unlucky saw none of the money. Those who considered themselves lucky saw some of the money. And those who considered themselves very lucky saw more of the money because they were open to the possibility. So, how open are you to the possibilities that present themselves? How often does something come up and you energetically move yourself away and say, oh no, I don't think that's for me? And there's a difference between that and really tuning into your inner wisdom and thinking, is that right for me? Because if it's fear that's stopping you, that's very, very different. And the more you step out of your comfort zone and you're prepared to face your fear and do it anyway, the more possibilities which will open up to you. Recognize if you always do what you've always done, you always get what you've always got. And ultimately, if you want things to be different, you've got to show up day by day differently. I think having an authentic voice and being authentic is incredibly important. It's one of the reasons why my company is called Genuinely You. When we are being authentic, true to ourselves, and that may at times mean being vulnerable, then we know that what we are offering the world is us. We all at times put up a facade, that facade of being what we think other people want us to be. But being authentic and finding your authentic voice is absolutely vital if you are going to fulfill your potential. Now, how you use your voice is really important. When I was a principal for 20 years, a head teacher. And in my very early days, I worked with a woman who, her excuse was that she was from the north and she was blunt. The reality is that she was very rude and she was very hurtful. And so what I would say to you is using your authentic voice is about being honest and open, but doing that in a loving, compassionate way to yourself and to other people. But being prepared to say, no, I can't do that, not at this time. Being prepared to tell people that's not good enough, but in the context of setting up high, explicit shared expectations and then holding them to account, holding yourself to account. Being authentic is, well, it's a whole course in itself, really. But you know when you're being true to yourself. For me, it's that light feeling when things are right, that I feel good about myself. If you're not feeling good, question whether or not you're feeling authentic, because inauthenticity does not give you the opportunity to be limitless. It keeps you in that prison. And that prison it's an interesting one because it hides, well, it pretends, it's inauthentic. It pretends to be keeping you safe, but it isn't. It's doing the opposite. And so at the times it means being prepared to be vulnerable and say, I need some help. I don't know how to do this. Not in victim mode, poor me, I need some help. But actually, you have some expertise. I think you can help me. And actually, I'm open to being helped. So making the distinction between being vulnerable and being a victim. None of it is about being a victim. This is about being the hero or heroine in your own life story. You're the author of it, so make the most of it. And I think for so many people, and I've worked with thousands of people over the years, it's giving yourself permission to shine. So many people have been brought up, it's rude to boast, you shouldn't do that, that when you're being authentic, it's not about being boastful. It is about, I have the capacity to shine and be the illumination for others. For me, I'd like to make the connection between purpose and shining. Because when you are shining in the context of your purpose, that illumination enables you to help other people. And I think I said right at the beginning that for me, my big purpose is to help people become leader of leaders, to step out in front of the crowd. Human beings resemble lemmings in so many ways. If you go to the beach, people are always crowded in one place, and it's the few who walk away, not that far down the beach, to find a place for themselves. If you are a limitless leader, then you are someone who has the capacity to shine the way for others, and that your purpose is here to be the illumination, to be the beacon, a bit like a lighthouse that's lighting the way for ships, to keep them safe, to show them the way. So time to shine. Don't hold yourself back. The time for that has gone. It's so important that you become the amazing creative human being that you are, and that you step into your purpose and you shine your light for others. Now, let's redefine what we mean by the blueprint for leadership. Okay, so what do we mean by that? So this is time to challenge old ways of thinking. I think I started off by saying that the thinking that's got us to this place as a race isn't going to be the thinking that gets us out of this place. If you look at the damage that's been done in the last 150 years to the planet, how we are using our resources, how we are, animals are becoming extinct at an unprecedented rate. We as a human race, we as each individual within that human race, have to think about doing things differently. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And, one of my favorite quotes of all time is Einstein talking about, definition of madness is to keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. And yet we all do it. We do it harder, we do it more often. And we are then surprised when we don't get the result that we want. If you are a limitless leader, this is about opening the horizons to new ways of thinking. And in order to do that, it's so important that you challenge the old ways. Those that are working, be really mindful. Are they working just for you? Are they working for a few? But are they working? Think about enlightened leadership, the impact on yourself, your family, society, on the planet as a whole. And if your thinking is actually doing good for all four categories, then you know what you're doing is really right. Question the rules of engagement, how you go about things. I'm reminded, I worked with lots and lots of experts at the very beginning of my business, Genuinely You. Now, this is my third career, if you like. I was a teacher and a principal, a head teacher for over 20 years, taught for 30 years. Then my second business, Gina Gardner Associates, which is still going, was very much working with individuals and businesses. Genuinely You is about getting to a much bigger audience using the internet, using technology. And I was told by so many people, you have to niche down, you have to niche down, you only work with one group of people. And I really struggled with that, because I have over the years worked with so many different types of businesses, so many types of people. And I recognize that these principles really work across the board, whether I'm talking to leaders or empaths or to mothers or to whatever. These principles are principles for life. And I was getting bogged down, and it felt restricting, and it felt heavy, and it felt difficult. And it wasn't until I started to work with a lady called Ali Nicole Wow, who then gave me a very different perspective on things. And that's one of the reasons why it's so important to work with a coach or a mentor, particularly one that is going to challenge you to redefine your thinking. And that was, yes, you may market them in a different way, you may present them in a different way, but ultimately they are part of your empire. And so rather like, there are different countries in an empire, that you actually have different strands of your business that work with different groups of people, if that's your thing. And in doing that, what it did, instead of it all becoming so restricted and narrow, it just opened things up. I was happier because it felt right. It resonated with me as being right. And for me, it's opened up all sorts of possibilities because I am doing what feels right to me. And I've questioned the rules of engagement, and I am doing things very, very differently and with great results. And I would urge you to think about it. And what works for me may not work for you. It has to be right for you. But we tend to get caught up in the same old, same old, same old. 95% of our thinking is habitual. We don't question it at all. So ultimately, this is about you recognizing your value, recognizing your worth, and questioning the rules of engagement. Again, being really clear about your purpose, very, very important. Think about how you propose to deliver it, because so often we might change our thinking, but we want to use exactly the same vehicle to deliver it. And oftentimes it requires something different. Create and maintain forward momentum, okay? That ability to see ourselves moving forward. If you are staying still, however successful you are, think of the curve of success. You have to start the next development before you finish the last, to maintain that forward momentum. This is all about evolution and expansion. Evolution is absolutely ongoing. The best version of you is the version of today, and you use that as the foundation to grow into the best version of you tomorrow, and so on. It is ongoing if you choose it to be. And it requires you to expand your thinking and keep expanding your thinking. You're never done. It's a lifelong journey. And, recognizing that you have the capacity to operate at a completely different level, even though at times it may feel uncomfortable to start with, is so important, because when you've got the confidence to do that, then you can really move things forward. I've talked a little about vibration. As we operate, we are vibrating. All of us are energy, and our mood, our language, every word that we use, every action, every emotion has a vibration. And if your vibration is based on, I can't, I'm not good enough, this won't work, it's a very low frequency vibration. It's very limiting. Coming from a place of, it's possible, that I'm coming from a place of love, of connection, of wanting to make a positive difference. And when you do that, the expansion not only gets bigger, but it gets quicker. And then as you open up that possibility, it's then harnessing the power of that new energy to take your purpose further. And the more you do that, the more it almost feeds off itself and takes on a life of its own, and it becomes really exciting. So let's look at the pitfalls. An unwillingness to step out of your comfort zone. If you stay stuck in your comfort zone, you're going to stay there. Nothing's going to change. Let go of the old baggage. Your old limiting beliefs, the things that keep you stuck. Those habitual patterns, all of those will keep you stuck where you are. And it's really important that you recognize those and do something about it. One of the things that can really help you move forward is writing books and creating programs, because not only does that mean that you can serve a whole group of people who are operating where you are now, and that can create a passive income, you're sharing your expertise, your experience, and in the writing of them, you are also developing, expanding your own thinking. So you move on, you leave the book and the program operating at that level for those people who need it. You've moved on and you create the next one. And so the process goes on. And it doesn't have to be difficult. Embrace the Author Within, a book I've written, talks about how you can write books very easily. And these intentional journals, which are there helping people do the work for themselves, they're a great way of doing that. So explore that. You'll find that on Amazon. But writing books and creating programs, sharing that expertise, how many things, if you'd known that before you started, with the power of hindsight, how about if you'd had that as foresight? That would have saved you time, money, a whole range of aggravation, and you can help other people do that same. And also it provides a passive income and credibility. If you're a published author, you have credibility. So once they're created, they can share where you were. Let go of the attachment of the creation, because that allows you to level up and move on. And then you can be ready for people who are at the next stage. Well, how do you show up? Moment by moment. In your personal life, in your business life. Think about that, because the process is important. The challenges that we are offered and the new ways of thinking are opened up if and as you allow them to. What gets in the way? That's you. Now, my experience is that initially your brain confuses, it's going, how do I manage that? With a plethora of possibilities. So you need to take time to process the new thinking. For me, it's about, it feels heavy when it's wrong, it feels right when it's light. You may have a different sense, but you need to get in tune with that. And the only way you'll do that is to give yourself permission. And it could be great. You need to be quiet. You need to find a time when the white noise and the busyness is gone. And, I was talking to the client this morning. I asked her the question, do you listen to the voice of your business? Looked at me as if I was a bit mad. And then I said, if you really are quiet and you get in tune, you get in alignment with your business, what does it need? You're telling me you're overwhelmed by all of these things you've got to do. How much of them are busyness and how much of them are what you need to do? And the more you are quiet and you get in tune with the voice of your business, the more you will understand which are the right things to do. Warren Buffett, richest man in the world, he talks about that he did not listen to that inner voice early on in his career, and it cost him £1 billion. £1 billion. You think of the guy that runs Virgin Atlantic. He talks about using his intuition to recognize when he's got enough data and when he hasn't. Is it the right sort of data? When shall I move on? I have to say his name completely escapes me at the moment, but you'll know who I'm talking about. Get in tune with the voice of your business. Being quiet and tuning into your inner wisdom is so important. And lots of us just get caught up in the busyness and the noise, and we don't allow ourselves time to do that. And then once you have the clarity, it's time to take swift action and engage in harnessing that energy and engage the momentum. Don't faff about, don't procrastinate and wait. You need to then move, but you need the clarity first. Interestingly, there is a prime time to do things. And so often with a business, it's about, capturing that right time. And, for me, I talk about the vibrational energy. A delay in taking action when the energy is right can then stall things. And it's then very difficult to create that momentum. Or there are times when, you've done all the preparation and you think, it feels like pushing a bus uphill and it's not working. And some of that may be that it's not the right action. Some of that may be it's not the right timing. And again, the more you are prepared to be quiet and tune into the vibrational energy, you will find that you are able to discover when it's appropriate to leave, to reprioritize, to redesign things in order to move with the flow of energy. You know, I work with many, many people, and the capacity to be self-motivated is what really makes the difference in terms of whether people are limitless leaders or not. If you're waiting for somebody to remind, nag, cajole you, encourage you to get on with it, rather than just being motivated to get on with it, then you are limiting yourself, because you're limiting yourself in terms of how much other people are taking responsibility for your stuff rather than you. It is a vital aspect of taking radical responsibility. Be self-motivated, get on with it, be it, do it. Don't wait for other people. Recognize your own patterns. And as I go through this list, I want you to really be honest with yourself. You know, do you do stuff because people have nagged you or cajoled or reminded or inspired or motivated you? Now, the inspiration and motivation is an interesting one. They can really help, but if you only get on with things, get on with being in a particular way, when somebody does the rah-rah bit and you're thinking, no, I've got to wait for inspiration, then you're going to wait, and you're going to wait a long time. Be careful you don't get caught up in the illusion that you're waiting for inspiration, rather than you're waiting because you're frightened, or waiting because you're fearful that you're going to fail, or because you don't feel that you're good enough. And I would say to you, be the inspiration and the motivation for others. There are some who are motivated by new projects, but they get bored very easily. And either they don't finish things, they don't see things through. Is that you? Or you're good at those things you enjoy, but you don't do the stuff that actually you don't. And those of you that may be familiar with the film The Karate Kid, you know, he had to wax on and wax off. If you haven't seen the film, very old film, but really important lesson in there, that the teacher made the boy rub things on and rub things off, wax, paint his fence. And what he was doing is getting those movements into the muscle memory. Be aware that sometimes you have to do the stuff you don't like, the foundational stuff, in order then to have that strong foundation. And again, remember that you're modeling that for other people. If you only do stuff that you enjoy, and then you're expecting other people to do all the dross, then that's difficult. Now, there's a difference here. Work to your strengths, absolutely. And if you are in a position that you can find somebody whose strength is the bit that you don't like, great. But don't use the fact you don't enjoy it as an excuse not to get on with it when it needs to be done. Some people are always engaged by the next bright, shiny thing, and they go off and do that and they don't follow through. So be aware if that's your pattern. You know, do you need other people to really notice what you're doing and to praise and congratulate in order to move on? Or do you simply get on with it quietly because you know it's the right thing to do? Or are you a fly by the seat of your pants merchant? They were the hardest people to work with when I was a principal or a head teacher. Those people who were given a deadline and they would not meet their deadline, or just about meet their deadline, and keep other people waiting. So be very mindful. And if that's you, create some false deadlines that give you a bit of wriggle room, because often something would happen and then the deadline would be missed. Create a strong foundation. And I've talked about the Karate Kids, the wax on, the wax off, really, really important. Having a strong sense of purpose, because that supports self-motivation. Again, what is your purpose? It's your North Star. It acts as the navigational tool that keeps you on track. I can't emphasize enough. And if you don't know what your purpose is, that's okay. Be curious. Allow yourself to explore rather than just ignore. But it keeps you on track. It is so important to be curious in life, not just about your purpose. Let go of trying to control the shape of the outcome, because so often it comes out of left field and it's something, the opportunity brings something you'd never even considered before. But if you're so set on it being a particular way, you will limit things. Really important. Talked about this before. Developing your connection to your inner wisdom and to source. Quieten the white noise. Inner reflection, so important. Now, meditation may not be your thing. Journaling is a great way to do it. Just write without filter. Getting out into nature is another one. Allow yourself to be. Trust your intuition. Test it out with small things, but listen to that gut feeling. Listen to that inner voice that says, this feels okay, or be careful, because it will guide you and it will rarely do you wrong if you have learned to work with it. It is time to get started, because the only thing that's going to limit you is you. And if you do the deep inner work, if you actually work on being open to the possibility that you can be so much more, and that you reflect on the old patterns that are holding you back, you will find that you are able to develop and grow at an exponential rate. You don't need to do this on your own. No, this is a self-study program, and for many people that's what they can afford and that's what they like to do. I think the statistics around self-study are that something like 97% of the self-study books or courses that are actually bought are used. Is that going to be you? If you know that you work better in a group, if you go to ginagardnerassociates.co.uk, you will find that there are programs where you can join as a group, or you can work one-on-one if you really want to accelerate your program. There is an accredited leadership program, 10 months, where you can really telescope. That is fully supported. You can find that at enlightenedleadership.co. So ginagardnerassociates.co.uk, enlightenedleadership.co, because there you'll be supported by leadership facilitators and by me. So there's lots of different ways. So email me at info@genuinely-you if you're interested in knowing more, or go to one of the websites. But ultimately, make the opportunity, take the choice to get on and to make the difference. Now, we're at the end of the presentation, but we're at the beginning of your journey. If you haven't got it already, I really recommend that you get Enlightened Limitless Leadership from Amazon or from the one of the websites. ginagardnerassociates.co.uk has got it on a website. And that gives you a structured workbook, a structured journal to help you really work through the things that we've talked about today. Today is the beginning of the rest of your life. It's entirely up to you how your life is going to go. You are the person who will make all the difference. So I invite you to become an enlightened, limitless leader, to take your place in the world, to give yourself the opportunity to grow and to develop, and to recognize that you have much to offer. Thanks so much for listening. I'd love to hear from you. Gina@genuinely-you.com. Let us know how you're getting on. And if I can help, then please reach out. Take care now. Bye-bye.